Apologies for starting 5 minutes late, y'all. We're gonna get started. We got a lot to talk about. I'm sure everybody's here and excited about the Athens Drive schematic design. But no laughs. I'm smiling. That's not why everybody's here. Want to appreciate the Wake County Chair being here, Susan Evans. Thanks for joining. Good seeing you. Mark, let's get started with operations update.
Okay, and just so you know, we do have a large contingent here today. We have a lot of people involved in a lot of things, and you know, they like to see what's going on and participate as well. So we have some good team members here today. So I'll share with you today, beginning with M&O, our vacancy rates with hires and resignations is about the same in most areas, although the additional support that we've been getting from HR has been most appreciated. Our non-administrative positions, meaning those that are typically out in the field doing the work, is about at 83%. HVAC positions are mostly filled, which is a great thing, although I would be remiss if I didn't put in a plug by saying that we still need more positions, so we'll go with that. Transportation, again, credit to HR for their continued efforts in helping us, HR and communications and many groups, and getting bus drivers. We're still at about 615, which is a little lower than we have been recently, but recruiting efforts remain strong, and we're still trying to move forward to get to that 630 number that we desire to be at in order to maintain current staffing levels for the new schools that we're opening next year. An interesting note that you all may not have heard much about before are the 10 new propane buses that we have in the district. 8 of them are in the Broughton Inload area. The other 2 are parked at Southeast Raleigh High. They are in service and being used now, and we're scheduled to get 5 more of them next year. Propane is considered a clean fuel. And based on the mechanics that I've talked to in other districts, they are pretty easy to work on as well. So that's a real positive thing. And again, we'll get 5 more next year. The Child Nutrition Department, I don't want to steal your thunder, but the Towards Zero Waste people, we met with them last week, had a great conversation about the pilot program that is taking place in 8 of our schools right now. It is going pretty well. I've had some other districts reach out to me, other places where I've worked, to find out some about it, so that may be something they may look to pilot in other places. And then I believe next month we're desiring to bring an update from the Towards Zero Waste people. So that'll be coming next month. And then lastly, FD&C, I guess the highlights are that we have 4 schools obviously opening this summer. Everything is on schedule, although slightly delayed, but staff tells me we'll be in good shape to get furniture and people in the building and ample time to open, particularly Pleasant Plains. That would be the one that's obviously the closest because it's a year-round school. But I've been out there several times, and there's increased emphasis out there, but according to the schedule and what we've seen happen before, we still feel good about it.
Any questions? Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Strickland, for those updates. I just had a question as it relates to special education transportation. Are there updates on that? Are we in a good place? Or how much recruitment do we need to do?
So we continue to recruit. We continue to ask our vendors to increase their number of cabs that they have. I don't want to jump ahead, but we will be bringing a contract amendment to you all at the next board meeting, facilitating some additional service from those vendors. And we've been working with our attorney on that, and it was something that we needed to do.
I just have one follow-up. Are we still doing the reimbursement for families next year? Okay.
Only question I have is when we have new schools opening, we have 4. When does the new bus routing bus routes be? When are they established to work into the county so we know what needs to be filled?
We'll have them out and ready to publish probably early summer, particularly for the year-round school. They've been working on them for some time, since the spring, and so they'll be coming out soon.
Any other quick questions? Nope. All right, moving on, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from,
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, nay? All right, moving on, Athens Drive High School schematic design.
Mr. Sharp's going to take over there.
Thank you for allowing us this time to present to you the schematic designs for Athens High School. I have with me here today Alice Reese, who many of you all have already seen many times. She is our senior site planner, as well as Elizabeth Wakeford, who is our senior building planner. So I'm going to turn it over to, I think we'll start with Elizabeth.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Taylor, Chair Hegarty, members of the Facilities Committee. We're excited about this project. It's been a little while coming. It's a fantastic school, and we really want to just make it as much of what it needs to be as we can. So today we'll begin with an analysis of the standard high school space program, which determined which existing spaces were in the most need of attention for renovation work, and those with more moderate and minimum need. And then later we'll show you proposed additions and phasing that will be required in order to safely keep students on site during the whole project. Okay, so can you go back one, Kelly? So this slide here shows color-coded that in comparison with the standard high school program space standards, less than 75% in orange is happening in Athens. So we've got a need for improving, increasing, bettering those spaces in order to bring them up to the other schools in the district. Pink shows 75 to 85%. We're close to program, but still not quite there. 85 to 100%, even closer, 100% or more. You can see there's a lot there that we're in good shape. So the colors also indicate the type of renovation. Orange is significant renovation. Pink is a little less, kind of moderate, and yellow is minor renovation, paint, carpet. So you can see from major renovation of tearing out walls and reworking the whole thing to paint, we're kind of running the gamut.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Can you explain not included in current program, the gray?
Sure. Those are spaces that Athens has that are not part of the standard high school program, and they might just be extra spaces from when the building was built in 1978. What was important then, we don't necessarily have now. Same thing on the lower floor, although far less extensive renovation and a whole lot of, we're in a really good place, which is great.
And this is depicting the site, talking about those buildings Elizabeth was talking about. The orange one is the 1978 original building. The green classroom addition came on in 1996. And in 2009, we had our first 8 classroom modular here just south of the green. By that time, we had 5 single classroom modulars north of the school. And then in 2012, the second 8 classroom modular came onto the site, and that's just south of the softball field existing today. In 2016, Athens received the stadium renovation. So there's a history since 1978 of a lot of addition and renovation projects. And This slide is a current aerial photograph of Athens. You can see again the building here is this gray roof. It's sprawling. Here's that new classroom addition. The two white roofs are the large 8-classroom modular units. What you don't see in this site is there's a lot of topography. So as Elizabeth showed, the school is 2 stories, but you enter the main level and then you go down. So the topography falls from the kind of the intersection of Jaguar and Athens to this corner here. There's some drainage features and so on and so forth. So again, you enter here at the 1 level and you're walking down. These are a whole classroom lower when you enter the athletic fields. We do have excellent site access, so we have 3 streets that we can access the site from. Jaguar Drive, again, is mainly used for student access to student parking. On Athens Drive, we have 1 driveway that's an ingress, 1 driveway that's an egress, primarily used for library patrons. And Avent Ferry, we actually have 3 driveways here. The first one is carpool. Parents enter and exit the same driveway, followed by a bus driveway, enter and exit buses. And this down here, you can't see it, it's an emergency access driveway, so limited use. Oh, don't advance, Kelly, I forgot. Okay, the red line is the property line. And you can see our track facility is sitting on a City of Raleigh park. We have a joint use, so I did want to point that out. It's a 50 acres site, just shy of 50 acres, and normally on a high school site we have about 70 is what we look for. So that's why the track is sitting outside, and our practice field is also outside of the property limits. This is a proposed site plan for the renovation project. The blue buildings are the blue boxes indicate the new buildings in addition. So the classroom wing would be here, kind of on the Athens side. You can see the modulars are gone. So the students housed in the modulars would move up into the classroom wing. We have a brand new entry vestibule, and again, that was one thing we heard in the visioning session is, there's no real entry to the school, and so we're going to create a very distinct entry. And then on the north side of the building, we have a proposed gym addition. It's currently an alternate for the bidding. If the budget allows, we can accept those bids on that. And then in terms of the site carpool and vehicular stacking, what you're seeing here is like DOT's ideal dream of flow. You have a parent drive entry, you have a parent drive exiting, and you have a separate bus drive, and there's some staff parking here. Well, I had my monthly meeting with DOT, like collaboration meeting, and I was letting them know some of the concerns we heard from the neighbors of the condominiums here. They've been there for 40 years. So they had some concerns about the traffic here. So once DOT started looking at that, they were looking at the vertical and horizontal curvature of that road. I know you guys all know it's fun. And that bus driveway here would require some left turns into the campus. And given that this side can't be widened, they are really looking at the numbers very, very hard. So we did a lot of analysis. We gathered a lot of data to look at those numbers and see if what we have now, although it's not their ideal, is working. And I just heard from the traffic engineer, we had 1 minute of backup on the road at 7:13 in the morning. So, and it was all contained in the left turn lane, parents going in. I thought it was funny. The reason they were going in slowly was because of a speed bump right there. So anyway, we are working through with DOT what this will ultimately look like, but we may end up keeping the driveways and just doing some minor modifications as well as repaving because the pavement is a little bit baffled.
Don't advance to the next one. I think we skipped slide 4. Can you go back to that? Right there. Okay. So this past December, Mosley Architects and FD&C held visioning sessions with students, staff, and parents regarding our plans for this project. In the student session, representatives from each grade level were asked what they considered to be the most important issues as we plan a renovation to their school. Responses ranged from wanting more natural light to improving the acoustics between band and chorus and getting rid of the mobile classrooms, of course. There were also comments about brightening up the overall look of the school. At the parent-staff session, the design team emphasized that improving security throughout the campus is a priority and will be emphasized through clear designation of a new main entrance, mentioned by Alice, where all visitors will be screened before being allowed in. Okay, now, slide 10, please. There we go. So the proposed building plan, you can see in gray at the top, that is a new classroom addition with about 2 stories with about 22 classrooms in it that contain several magnet and CTE spaces, such as medical science classrooms, maker space, organic chemistry, just to name a few. These were identified by the principal and magnet and CTE as being, a lot of the attraction to Athens. So what we want to do is make sure that these spaces are celebrated and are new and clean and front center. You can also see the new front entry right there with the secure vestibule. This will be the main point of entry for visitors. To the left, or to the right on the plan, is admin, and to the left is student services. The classroom addition attaches at the main level of the school, so the first floor, and it also attaches at the lower floor. The alternate that has been mentioned in blue is a new main gym and lobby, which would serve both the auditorium and the new main gym. It's really for a gathering space and a public entrance for those attending games and theater productions. Implementation of this new addition would allow the existing main gym to become an auxiliary gym. The area is labeled as an alternate to the program due to funding restrictions. Right now, it's just plain outside our budget with all the other things that we need to do. If ultimately we find we're unable to add the new gym, there's a contingency plan, right where Alice is showing, base bid addition, which is the existing gym will remain as is, and the gray block on the left side of the plan will be a base bid addition to include dance, drama, and other support spaces, giving existing band and chorus a bit more breathing room. The areas shown in red, again, indicate major renovation for administration, student services, auditorium support areas, office, and the aux gym, which would become a band classroom on the main level. Next slide. So this is the lower level where you can see, again, the classroom addition. Below the relocated band room, the lower floor would have the training room and other athletic programming, including a proposed weight room and wellness room. Again, you can see significant renovation in the red areas for the aux gym, the locker rooms, the weight room. Everything down there just needs a lot of work. And we're prepared to do that. Okay, next please. This is a rendering of the proposed front with clear front entry to the school. The classroom wing is shown on the right with the corner expressing some of the super important magnet and CTE rooms like the medical sciences, organic chemistry, the shared hospital room or mock hospital room, things like that. Also in this room are several general classrooms and art classrooms with a maker space that have access to the courtyard below. This main entrance and new classroom wing form a significant courtyard which can be used by all students. It's going to be big. You can see there's plenty of planting in there. It's just going to be a really nice space to look onto and to actually physically use. And the principal told us that the kids can go anywhere they want for lunch, and I imagine this would be a big deal to just sit in this area. Let's see. The more contemporary architectural elements present a newer, more progressive building and help to emphasize and celebrate the significance of the magnet, STEM, and CTE curricula offered at Athens. This is, I don't need to tell you, this is really an amazing school with everything that they offer, and we really want to call that out in a physical way. In addition, the new classroom wing provides an opportunity for clear and stately branding. Next slide, please. This view shows the alternate of the proposed new main gym and lobby addition. The student entrance is accessed from student parking, as you saw on the site plan. And again, new architectural elements and branding define a new and bold era for Athens Drive Magnet High School. Before you ask, the solar panels shown on the gym roof, we have been tasked with trying to make all our schools, additions, renovations, and new schools solar ready. So this is an effort toward that. The panels show what that would be a bid alternate, unfortunately, along with that whole mass. But we know that the roof is being designed to manage the panels. So that's where they would go, and that would serve the whole school.
So phasing of the construction. The students will remain on campus during the construction. So as you know, that requires phasing, and it stretches that process out a little bit. Phase number 1 is what we call enabling phase. So that's preparing some areas in advance of the construction. For example, removing those modular units, paving more parking, if parking is going to be displaced or used by contractors for laid out staging, those types of construction projects. That would begin in the fall of 2026. And we're looking at about 5 phases. There'll be some mini phases in there as well, but 5 main phases with the construction to be complete in
Fall of 2029. And a lot of these phases are going to be done over the summer and holiday times, summer months and holiday times. So the CMAR is going to try to do as much as possible when the kids aren't there. But it's going to be a job site for a good 3 years.
Question for you, and I'm going to turn it over to she's got a question. Can you tell me again where the current bus loop is? And because you said you would be adding, whose decision was it to add that to Avon Ferry Road? Or is it already there?
Okay, so there is a bus loop here with a driveway here.
Right.
So DOT likes us to separate our incoming carpool parent traffic from exiting traffic.
Right.
So we are trying to use the existing driveways that we have. We have the 3 driveway cuts, so we would give one to entering parents, one to exiting parents, and take the 3rd for the bus
Is
traffic.
are they currently all entering and exiting from and to Avon Ferry?
Same, yeah, they enter and exit here, parents, and buses enter and exit here.
Okay, so we're not adding traffic to that area?
No.
Okay, that's
No,
what.
we're just changing the amount of traffic at each driveway.
So they're used to it already?
Yes, and so that's why DOT is looking at the numbers to make considerations of their ideal where you have the separated traffic. Yeah.
Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you. So, what's going to happen to the existing administration spaces? Will they be fitted for classroom space? Is that part? I know you're moving administration, they're getting a new space, but what happens to that existing space? Is that part of this project?
We have the architect here. This is Ashley Dennis with Mosley Architects.
Again, I'm Ashley Dennis with Mosley. And so to your question, the area where the administration is now will become an expansion of the cafeteria. And then some of that will also roll into new classrooms. So it's a little bit of both. But the cafeteria is one of the core spaces that is a bit undersized. And so that's an opportunity to, one, expand that, and two, get natural light into there, because we really only have one point that natural light comes in, and it has a pretty large overhang. So it's pretty dark in there.
Yep. Okay. And then my other question, as you all know, many of you know, I am on the Wake County Library Commission. We have a public library at Athens that is not open during the school day, public. So it's got limited hours and it's got some challenges. My understanding is you all don't need to close the library/media center, because it is also the student media center, to do this project. Is that correct?
I will answer in the fact that no, our intention is not to close it, but there will be moments where we will have to work with the county on how we do construction around the library and have the same flexibility that the school is going to provide. The library will have to provide at different phases, and that will all be worked through.
Elizabeth, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're already in communications with the library, the Wake County Library folks, and have a meeting scheduled with them so that we are in close coordination with them during this process.
Great.
Yes.
Because I'm going to advocate for it to remain open while this is going on, as the county decides where to relocate the public library.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? My only other question is, you said the gym is a question of finding funding. How much?
Right now, the estimate is 10 million.
That we're short that in order to do it?
We are short that in order to do it.
All right.
So I know Athens Drive, in addition to the public library that Ms. Edmonds had referenced, has other joint use agreements with the city of Raleigh. I know that they have the new stadium, but then the former stadium, I believe, is owned by the city of Raleigh.
Yes, that's correct.
And to Mr. Hershey's point, I was just wondering, they've got that Crowder Community Center nearby. If there are other joint use opportunities we might explore that might be able to bring some costs down and therefore free up some money for the gym. I just don't know enough about the site to know if there'd be anything there that would.
And there's any other opportunities, because they're not going to have any more of the field space is what we're in need of.
Except for the practice field and the track, all the athletic programming is on the site.
Yeah, it's just the main gym. I can't say that I wandered down to the gym when I was at Athens. It's not my forte. Do they have an auxiliary gym as well?
They do.
Okay.
They have they have a space that we would consider an auxiliary gym. They call it their lower gym. It's more of a mat room.
Okay.
I would.
They play ping pong in there too.
Yeah.
It's just, it was designed to be that, but it's,
Got it.
Much like the other gym, it doesn't quite meet the same standards as you would see in some of our newer schools.
right.
Thank you.
Ping pong is an Olympic sport. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Right along. Are you waiting for others?
I think I am.
CIP?
There's a whole list of names on that first
Yeah. So come on, y'all. Who's up? And the way we're going to do this is, take questions, some short questions if necessary for Primp and Snap, and then we're going to get into technology. And once we get into the technology discussion, that's going to kind of open up into the broader discussion about repurposing or potentially answering some questions about moving funding around within the CIP. So everybody has, I'm going to forward some questions that I had sent staff to board members, so you are, whoever wants to kick it off, let's go.
John?
So, actually, it's
Tony, I'm sorry.
Dr. Taylor and Facilities Committee, my name is Tony Champion. I'm the Director of Facility Assessments and Lifecycle, and I'll be talking with you today about the Lifecycle program. As shown on this slide, the Lifecycle budget for fiscal year 25 is $40 million. In fiscal year 26, that budget increases to $45 million. This is a considerable increase given just a few years ago our budget was $20 million. Lifecycle's typical budget breakdown sees us allocating approximately 50% of this budget for HVAC projects, 17% for other building systems such as fire alarm, intercom, 18% for site and athletics projects, and about 15% for building envelope replacement or restoration. For fiscal year 25, we are endeavoring to perform more than 40 HVAC and other building systems projects. These projects include HVAC replacement, chiller or boiler replacement, building automation system replacements, including R2 conversions, or taking old control hardware and software and converting it to current systems. N4 conversions, which is upgrading just software using the existing hardware to more current software systems, supported software systems. Intercom replacements, fire alarm replacements, noted as FA on this list, elevator replacements, etc. We're also performing 7 site and/or athletics projects, including tennis court replacements, track replacements, parking lot repaving, and striping, and gym floor replacements. Lastly, we're performing 5 major building envelope replacements this year. For fiscal year 26, our plan is to perform 28 HVAC projects, which also include, have the inclusion of other systems such as fire alarm or intercom. These are less projects than we did in fiscal year 25, but it's because we plan on doing more larger projects than we did in 25 due to the large number of those individual chiller replacement projects that we had to perform. They include full HVAC replacements, heating and cooling plant replacements, building automation system replacements, intercom replacements, fire alarm, and elevator replacements.
What's R2 conversion? Package 2.
An R2 conversion?
Package 2, yeah.
Second.
So the R2 conversions are where we have an older chase which is no longer supported by the server at Energy Management, and they can't communicate with it, so therefore they can't see what's going on at the school. And so we're converting those to newer hardware, newer software that Energy Management can see and help diagnose issues at a school. Let's see, where are we at? Okay, we're also aiming to perform 5 site or athletic replacements, including tracks, tennis courts, sewage lift station refurbishments, and asphalt paving projects. Lastly, we will be performing a minimum of 4 roof replacement projects. The Lifecycle Department has added 2 new positions since the last time we spoke, and we're seeking to fill a vacant existing position. Although unfilled at this time, we are optimistic that at least one of the new positions could possibly be filled prior to the FY26 projects starting the design process in mid-August.
Anyone have questions for that? All right. Oh, back to it.
Did you have a question?
I think we can ask it later. It's just sort of in general, we've talked about the balance with our HVAC systems and sort of the question between the older systems that do seem to be built to last but have fewer techs qualified to work on them. And the newer systems, which may not be as sturdy, but seem to have more available technicians. And I just didn't know, looking at all of those projects, it seemed like an awful lot were dedicated to the old systems. If we've thought about conversion, or has there been any sort of cost benefit on that?
On converting older systems?
Yeah.
There is some energy savings converting to older systems. At the moment, we're trying to make sure that all of the existing systems are functional so that we avoid closures. There's a sweet spot in the chillers that's not the older systems and not the newer systems, but some of those in between that we're having a lot of issues with. So you'll see that when we're doing some of these replacements, there are some older systems that we're not touching, and that's because we've spent very little money maintaining them and they're continuing to work appropriately. And some of the newer systems are failing and need to be replaced in order to keep schools open.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So we're going to move on into our SNAP needs for the district, and these are our space needs analysis prioritization projects. These are your non-traditional educational needs, and then your central service needs and your operational needs. So as we have listed here, we have, these are 3 of our sites that we are concentrating on right now. We're in the information gathering stage for each of these. Currently, right now, Rock Quarry Road and Capitol Boulevard, after meeting with all of the stakeholders beneath the sites listed, we have found that these are our most central locations for Wake County, giving them ease to get to all of our 200-plus schools in the district. So we have met with all of these groups, and for the Rock Quarry site, this is more of our auxiliary services. So that is their central hub, and right now we're just looking at how we can use this site more efficiently. Right now it's very spread out. Can we build up, give them more room for, buses? I know that our transportation center is really looking to see if they can get more of a heavy equipment hub at our Rock Quarry site, because that is their most central. So we're looking at maybe expanding the transportation bays right now for heavy equipment. We are also looking at renovating their current working conditions for better space for daily use. And so we're working with an architect firm right now, and we're just gathering information from each of them, and we're doing a feasibility study. So once we get that feasibility done, we'll start looking at cost. We'll start looking at how we can phase the project. Maybe we can do a phase project here. We can do a phase project at Capitol Boulevard, and we may do one at Piney Plains using the existing money that we have. But we need to spend a little time working with our architects to do the feasibility study so that we can gather all of that information so that we can better plan for these sites. Rock Quarry Road and Capitol Boulevard are the ones that we currently have feasibility studies going on right now. Capitol Boulevard is going to be used more for some satellite locations for our central office. This helps. We've got families that have a hard time getting to Crossroads. So this is an area where they can get to, easy access. So we're going to create some satellite office space there that they can go to and assist our families, our communities that struggle to get here to Cary. And then Piney Plains, we are looking at more. This is, you can see, it's more, we're looking at regional. So when our district starts thinking of regional locations, we're starting to think, where can we put those regional transportation hubs? Where can we put the regional child nutrition, CTE spaces around the county? Also OPL, our training spaces, when we need to, not coming all to Cary. We've got Pequay Marina, we've got Charlotte have an area in the western part. So we have, that's what we're trying to kind of do, a master plan is what we're looking at. So that's kind of where we're starting with this slide here.
And I would add, this is a big picture, and you all have asked us to look at a 20-year vision for things. So there's a lot of stuff rolled into things that are being looked at and considered. But just know that we're trying to they are looking at a lot of options. There have been a lot of meetings with the different people throughout the district to find out what they will need in the future. So this is really high-level stuff right now that you all, in some shape or fashion, have asked us to look at and consider in the past.
So moving to the next slide. These are the sites that we currently have that we are using for more, like the Rockberry Road, Capitol, and Piney Plains. They've got some short-term needs, some short-term needs for the district that we would locate at these sites. And then on down is more of our long-term master planning, looking around that we can take all those needs and drop those in those areas around the county. So these are our, down below, our underutilized capacity right now that we can grab if we need a space, or we need to use it for swing space, we need to use it for training down in that area, we need to use it for a regional transportation center, we need to use it for some of our school programs. So these are our spaces we look at when someone comes to us and says, I have a need. So that's what we look at. This is kind of our pool of sites. So anything on SNAP before we go to print? Or you want to just save it for the end?
No, you did good asking those.
Okay. So moving on to partial renovation. The PREMP stands for, partial renovation improvements. And these are projects on our existing school campuses to help just bring those older schools up to more of our current standards. So in 2024, we've completed 14 projects thus far. We currently have 17 projects since 2025 that are currently either in the design phase or in the construction phase. And then we have 92 that have been submitted that are awaiting funding availability or just resource availability. So they're kind of in the queue is what we call it. Here are some of the larger print projects that have been submitted. For an example, Broughton High School, the submission was a new cafeteria. So these are larger projects that are going to require an architect to be hired. They're going to require probably a construction management group to be hired. So these are big ticket items. These are big dollars. So what we're going to do with these is over the next 2 years, we're going to perform some feasibility studies so that we can gather what the scope is, and then we can gather how much that's going to cost. So that will help us to better plan on our John will explain that to you, on our matrix to what projects we can do and which ones that we can continue to go down. What we're going to try to do is, get 2 or 3 in design and then have 2 years to design. Money's going to accumulate, and then we're going to be able to do the project. Because we're talking $35 million in some of these projects. These are not small projects. So we're going to move on to John's going to explain a little bit about how we can fund large projects like this.
So what we've tried to show here is funding year over year for the print fund increases from year to year, fiscal year to fiscal year. Unanticipated improvements, these are the small projects, the ones that we've completed 14 last year, we're going to do 17 this year. We're allocating $8 million this year for those projects. We're keeping that $8 million in there, along with some escalation, about 5% year over year, to account for those unanticipated improvements. The stuff that comes through the portal, the facilities needs portal, that the administrative staffs at the schools tell us, hey, we need some help with these projects. This year in fiscal year 25, we've allocated $9 million toward the Fuquay Arena Elementary School renovation. And then we're going to take the balance, about $800,000, to do the feasibility studies, the first 4 feasibility studies that Elizabeth mentioned. Now, the renovations are expensive when we get to these large ones. Fuquay's in the $30 million range. Brassfield was in the upper teens. So we've used those as benchmarks to look at what would those costs be over time as we want to go do some of these larger renovation projects, things like Broughton, right? So the design fees the $1.5 million you see up there, that's for design. The $35 million is an earmark for the construction costs down the road. And because we don't receive enough funding every year, we're having to accrue this money over time. So we'll spend through most of the fiscal year 25 year money, but in fiscal year 26 we'll begin to accrue. So you can see the bottom 2 rows where it says annual spend. That shows where we're spending less than $10 million, if you will, over the next few years, year over year, while we're running up the balance, so that when we jump into doing these projects, we have the funding we need to move forward and get them done. So we'll do the feasibility studies. Elizabeth's team will take some time, we'll talk to the stakeholders, figure out what that full scope's going to be, go out, do an RFQ, bring a designer in, and then that's a 2-year window. So you see fiscal year '27, we'd start the design, we start that project in fiscal year '29, which is, say, August of calendar year '28, with the 35 million. But that lets us get the design done, it lets us get all the submittals in and all the approvals back from the municipality so that we can start on time. So try to give ourselves time to get that done. All right, next slide. So these are some of the projects that we're rolling through. Some of these are at completion now. When we first put this together for a presentation to you guys back in March, some of these were just right on the cusp. But Lufkin Road, adding a CTE kitchen, I won't read them all to you, but you can see these are the smaller projects that we've been working on. You can go on to the next slide. And then the next slide. So that's what we've got in the queue for this year. Any questions from,
These have not been bond-funded projects.
they are bond funded.
They are bond-funded. So when you say accumulate, from what?
So when we, just round numbers, we receive $20 million next year. We won't spend all that 20 million. It'll stay in the budget. It'll roll into the following year. That's what I mean by accumulate.
It stays in the bond program.
It stays in the bond program, I'm sorry, yeah.
But when you did the bond, it wasn't for these projects?
Not specifically, no. The CIP effort is 3 categories: new schools, additions, renovations, and then program requirements, which is where all of this falls. And typically, haven't been very specific on what projects fall in that bottom category, because many times we don't know until we get into it, or the project are submitted through the facility needs portal.
But when you have projects that run 35 million, is that kind of a different print category than traditionally it has been, or?
Yeah, so historically, the funding in the PREP program has not been this large. So when you take a project like Broad, and that's anticipated to cost in the $30 million range to add a cafeteria and do some other work there really wasn't funding in the PREP budget to be able to do that. Last year, we went back and we reallocated some funding from the SNAP funding back into PREP, which is why you see the increases across the top. That gives us the funding that we need to be able to go forward and do these minor major renovations, which doesn't sound right, but if the next step is, let's go to a school and tear it down and rebuild it, and now you're talking, $65-70 million, or the Athens Drive project where you're in the $60-70-80 million range. That's not a prep project. This is a partial renovation, not a full renovation.
Last question then, Ms. Mahaffey.
I'm good.
Okay. But when you're accumulating this money, and then but in the previous presentation, you said we can't find 10 million for the Athens Drive gym. Can you explain,
Different.
Where's Mark?
different pot of money?
Yeah, well, it's all within the bond program, but there are different pots of money. I mean, as we go through and allocate money for different projects, again, you've got some in the new, some in the additions, renovations, and some in the program requirements. It's not that we could pull back. I mean, we could certainly pull back and do something different, but there again, we continue to kick the can down the road of projects that have already been in the queue that never get done.
So in that vein, the gym project for Athens Drive could eventually be a PRIM project, but it may not be a part of the major renovation, if I'm following.
Yeah.
So just for clarity, you have 2 different sources of CIP dollars. Is that right? You've got debt funded and cash funded.
But we look at it as one.
Okay. So for example, if PREMP is typically debt funded and SNAP is typically cash funded, does it make a difference to you in terms of availability of funds or the ability to move funds?
It's not, the county has been flexible in terms of where we get the project funding from. what we found is there's more flexibility, I believe this is right, on the debt-funded projects where we can secure the funding in outer years as opposed to the cash, which is done on a year-to-year basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I was just curious about, which one, the reason why which one, so.
We got it from that's just how they set it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not going to ask it now, but I do have follow-up questions regarding the Athens Drive project and not doing it versus doing it and potentially a new bond covering a type project. But I want to save that for a different, I have to say with support on that. All right, please, continue.
Oh, we're going to hand it over to technology?
We're going to switch
Yeah,
up.
let's talk to the next.
Good afternoon, Board, and Superintendent Taylor. We come today to give you an update on the technology CIP portions of the funds. Along with me will be Ms. Lisa Belcher, who is our Senior Director in Technology, and Ms. Angela Roman, who is also one of our Directors in Technology. We provide the update to you.
So just to give you a little bit of information about historically how we have spent the bond dollars. Obviously, we are looking to support teaching and learning. The student devices go to the one-to-one program. Each student is issued a device. Over the period of the last 3 years, we have deployed quite a few devices, as you know, which we'll get into those numbers later. The staff devices are the laptops that go to the teachers, and I know that you had some questions about that we can get to at the end. Those were some specific things you asked us about. One thing that comes up a lot is the Promethean boards. Those are the interactive displays. They are replacing flat screen televisions that are non-interactive in the classrooms. That is a 3-year project that should finish next year. It's been approximately 1,800 panels every year to go through. That project actually also has to include the removal of the existing TVs, the installation of the new panels, and that's quite a significant project. Hotspots and connectivity solutions are managed by our social workers. They identify the needs of the students that need internet access at home that they do not have. That is also covered under the CIP funds. And some of the other things that are not obvious, but the refurbishment of damaged devices, older devices, the distribution centers, the wireless keyboards we have to purchase to go with the Promethean panels, the maintenance. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes things that add up very significantly to keep the technology moving and efficient for our students.
The goal of the tools that we push out there's several layers to it. One is to support the initiatives for instruction, whether it be one-to-one, whether it be every device in the classroom, as they become unusable, to ensure that every child, every student here in Wake County has an available device. If it's for repair, our desire is not to have that child waiting for a device to be repaired, but have one accessible to them, provided to them during the day so they can keep it. And to keep it up to date, current technology, not devices that are antiquated, that are the OSs or that's not available to run the current applications. Our desire is to have tools that our students can actually use, not only the students, but the staff as well, so they can facilitate that instruction. Behind the back end, the devices, yes, we see the devices, we see the iPads, we see the Chromebooks, we see the laptops, but there's an entire infrastructure behind that to make sure that these devices work. Oftentimes, I don't know if you've ever been on a network where it twirls, it's buffering. Our goal is to ensure that access to these tools is immediate. Not only is it immediate, but it's efficient, and the teachers and our staff are available to deploy and provide instruction to our students real time online without any hindrance. And the digital gaps, regardless of where we are, every student, we truly believe that all of our students are on different levels. So that regardless of where they are, that our teachers are able to meet our students where they are at the instruction level, regardless of where they come from, the zip code, socioeconomic status, but to meet our students where they are. Those tools accessible, not only the devices, but the back end, the front end, as well as the applications, to meet our children where they are real time. We wanted to provide you a 3-year trend as to the IT spend for technology. The blue is what was budgeted. The yellow is our actual spend. As you will see, we've been kind of right on for the last few years. This year, if you look at 24-25, considering that it's April, those we've accounted for those funds, we encumbered those funds, but we believe by June 30th, the actual spends will be around that. So as you will see, that the dollars allocated were truly in line with what we were actual spends to provide that service that Lisa was sharing, to provide those tools for real quality instruction for our babies. And lastly, looking ahead, I'm sure that we recently deployed a survey, and the focus of it was dual-fold. Number one, cell phone use in the classroom for our students, as well as technology use in the classroom. We have provided these, most of the time, developing or going through that survey data to determine the cell phone use for our students in the classroom. Now we're going to shift our attention to more of what the purpose of what that true technology footprint looks like in our school. We believe the preliminary review of the data suggests that a predominant of our teachers believe that that footprint is true, but we're going to go back to the committee now. There's a committee that has been developed. They are studying or reviewing that data. We're now going to go through, as we have finished at least come close to the finish of the cell phone policy, but now look at the deployment of those devices. What does our staff, what does our teachers truly want in our classroom? What do they truly need? We want to bring them together and just determine what that footprint look like for our students. That survey data, we believe, and we based on initial, again, overview or a review of that data, is suggesting that we're really close to where we need to be, but we need that confirmation. So after we review that data, we will come back to you at a later date with the results of what the survey or what that committee suggests and what that footprint look like in the classroom. And we will come back to the board at a later date for that. Any questions?
So I've got a bunch. I'm gonna start with a couple. You had the historical spending. Is that just devices? Because I'm looking at the CIP for 26, 27, and I've got a line for just devices, which is 27 million, and then I've got technology infrastructure, which is 7.4, and maybe that's tied to some of the necessary upgrades we're doing. But I saw 19 and then 24 and 24 effectively.
Yes, sir.
Where's my disconnect in those numbers?
You want to take that?
I can take that. So the line item we are talking about here is specific to the devices line item, what you're seeing in the CIP spreadsheet.
Okay.
The other line item, which talks about infrastructure, that has to do with the entire security footprint, what we do from the firewall, from the data center server setup, the whole thing. That's a whole different thing. So we haven't provided that information here, but that's a separate line item.
Okay.
Because the focus was on the devices. So
Right.
we wanted to really, even though it's reflected as one line item device, but we wanted to really tell the board what is the depth of that particular one line item. So that was the focus.
Go ahead and
Oh,
finish.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can I add to what
Yeah,
Mr. Badul was sharing? Yes, there's a several, but that 23 is more than devices. It is also the panels, the keyboards. So it's much more than just devices baked into that 23 million. Yes, ma'am.
So, two questions. Number one, is all of the CIP funding going towards physical devices, or is some of it going towards like software? So is it like, if you're buying a Chromebook, but then, let's say you put Microsoft Word on there that requires a license, is CIP money going towards that, or does that come out of an
Yeah.
operations budget?
So for example, the Google software which goes on, right, that comes up from the operational funding, right? Device itself comes from the CIP.
Yeah, just trying to show like where we've got two pots of money going towards the same thing. And then as you have the surveys and the information that you've gotten from parents, students, teachers, how does that work go with academics to talk about, like we hear a lot from parents, like for kindergartners to bring a Chromebook home is kind of heavy. And so how does that inform, what are the needs of the classroom versus what you all are looking to spend in the future?
Our hopes are that academics will be the driver, at least they will be the driver of the results of this. We often say that we're the truck driver, we bring it in and we offload it and they tell us what to do with it. So academics is part of this committee. They will dictate, as you said, for K, do they need iPads or should they have Chromebooks? For 1, 2, should we expand that to grades 1 and 2? So yes, academics will be the driver of that committee to determine academically, regardless of the pedagogy, or regardless of the instructional strategy, what tools, what devices, and what ratio is deployed to our babies.
Ms. Mahaffey, just to add to that, the way we have approached the overall device strategy this time is looking from an academics lens, looking from a lens of an educator. What is that we need to equip our students and educators to make sure they're able to give the required instruction, right? That's the lens we're looking at. So the survey, if you look at it, was also catered from that lens. So based on the needs of the educators and what our students need, we will actually get into the discussion and really put that plan together.
And Ms. Mahaffey, I'll add to that I think that is a very important question that you've asked because mobilizing, sending out Chromebooks or devices was a direct response to the pandemic, and that is what most districts had to do. And so what we do realize is that when we are in a non-pandemic situation, then the devices that they need at the different levels may vary. And so that's absolutely something we want to continue to have a conversation about, knowing that a Chromebook going home with a kindergarten is probably not what they need, but we all know that was that immediate response to the pandemic, and now we've got to get beyond that and think about what the everyday life will look like, and that's part of the questions that we'll be asking.
So I don't want to jump too far ahead because I know we have another agenda item.
No, this ties into it.
But I have some concerns about the information presented. And I'll just share all three of them first, and then if you can provide a response. I'm concerned about this survey and the way it's been described, because to me that sounds more like, what do you want, which should produce a lot of great answers, but it doesn't include at what cost. Or you could get all of these very useful tools, all of which have value, all of which would benefit children, but in doing so, for a district, what do we give up in terms of other priority items? And so, it's great to see what people might want, but I don't know in terms of our decision-making, I'd be more inclined to rely on the academic office and their recommendations more along the lines of what's needed. So I have that concern about the survey. To Mr. Hershey's point about the information previously presented and the information here, we have a 24-25 number of about 23, almost 24 million, but we just approved a CIP figure for fiscal year 2026 that jumps up to 28 million. So, that's about a $4 million increase. We don't have 25, 26, going to the next year. And, by percentage, that's a pretty significant increase. And so I'd like to either know what's the justification for the increase or what's not captured here to get to that lower number. And then, I guess finally, it would be very useful, I think, out of that 23 to 24 million a year, you mentioned several uses or several uses for that funding, knowing what they might be. Obviously, the one we're all aware of are device replacement, Chromebooks, right? And how that came out, this item really blew up as an emergency response to the pandemic. But then you mentioned the Promethean boards, and some of us will remember earlier the BenQs and other expensive office technology that we put into all of these classrooms. And while there might be incredible, amazing things you can do with a Promethean board, if we're looking at replacing and upgrading Promethean boards with, and I think you used, a lot of other things required that all add up to keep these running, versus not having enough money for HVAC equipment or renovating gyms in new buildings, could we get by with a whiteboard, right? Could we get by with, without something that's going to cost as much, depending on its usefulness? Again, the difference between a luxury and a need. As you said, a lot of this technology has a lot of sunken costs, both in terms of upgrades, replacement, maintenance. It has a human cost that we became well aware of in terms of staff necessary to support it. And I don't think I'm being overly dramatic here, but with a crisis in public education funding, where we're not getting the funds that we need to pay for the expenses of opening a new school from the state, we have to look at all of these expenses and see where we can find opportunities to reduce, to either reprioritize capital costs and to reduce operating costs, so that those really important key functions are there. I think a student might be denied an educational opportunity if they don't have that Promethean board, but they're also going to be denied an educational opportunity if they get sent home for 2 days because there's no heat in the building. So I think there's a lot of value to these tools. I really do. But I need more information about the expenses that have been presented.
And I guess I would add to that, as Dr. Taylor mentioned, the one-on-one device, or even having one of these boards in each classroom. When is that decision made?
So that is obviously a decision that each individual district will have to make. I can tell you that it's approached in various ways. One of the things we look at is the student to device ratio, and so you want to have about a 9.8 students to one device, and that says that most students will have access to a device that's almost one-to-one, and that's kind of where you want to be. But you absolutely have to make a determination as to what should that technology look like. What do they need? And so that's an individual decision that every district has to make. The other thing is that we also have to leverage that with how they use a device to access curriculum. So if you go into a school now, chances are you won't see an up-to-date textbook. I think it was in one of the Hill schools I was in, they had an old group of textbooks, but that's what you see. And so now we have to also balance that if we have this curriculum, how are students going to access that if they don't have technology, if they don't have the actual device to do so. The final piece that I would add is that, and I've been saying this for at least 12 to 15 years, that the difference now is that when we have to spend money on a capital need like computers and hardware and switches and networks, these are things that, as we all know, have to be upgraded quite often. Sort of like the iPhone. As soon as you get it, the network is running faster and you can't access it. That is, I think, the downside to it. So absolutely what we have to do now is to, what I call, recalibrate, knowing that we've got these issues that we're now in the thinking in the mode that we have to be prepared to go one-to-one. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but we do want to make sure that kids have access to devices. And so everything I know is this has been a 100-year pandemic, right? I hope to be retired if this ever happens again, and all of us in this room. But at the same time, one of the things I know we have to do differently is prepare for the technology landscape that we want that doesn't necessarily plan for a pandemic. I just think that is the wrong thing to do. But it is about, as a district, what do we believe is the right level of technology that kids need access to, and how much do we need to spend on that. And so I can tell you that We can always look to have a smaller footprint, and I understand, I agree with what you're saying, but I don't think that significant footprint is ever going to go away because technology changes so fast. But again, and I know we have Allison in the room, and I'll certainly allow you to give any feedback or input that you would want to add to this conversation, but that is what I know is the difficult part, is how do you balance your current technology needs and the cost of that and the time that it has to be renewed, knowing that kids also don't have textbooks. And so it's been very complicated over the last 5 years since that pandemic. Before that, I think we could reasonably understand what we needed to do, but the pandemic has us thinking differently, and I know we need to move back away from it. But Alice, I know you got a lot of thoughts on that.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I appreciate it. What I would say is that I do agree with you that it's a different landscape right now, right? And I also agree with the sentiment that this needs to be driven by academics and what problem are we trying to solve?
Yeah.
What is it that we need to put in front of our students? And textbook manufacturers, by and large, are not investing in physical textbooks anymore. And so we cannot be one-to-one, but then we have to answer the question of which kids don't get access, right? It's becoming a chasing the wind situation, right? And to your point, like the new iPhones, right? It's not necessarily about wanting the newest and the shiniest. It's quite frankly about not being able to upgrade from a security standpoint. At some point, technology ages to a point that you can no longer secure it because it is older, right? You can't run the updates. It won't accept the updates. So, using older technology certainly poses a fiscal savings, right? But then you have to weigh that with the risks of vulnerabilities from a cybersecurity standpoint. You also have to weigh that with what resources do students need instructionally from a curriculum standpoint, and what tools are they available on. Many textbook and digital resource companies are no longer investing in the physical resources as much as they are the digital, because they can update them more quickly. It's more cost effective for those vendors to operate in a digital space. So you just have to weigh one versus the other, and it does need to be driven by those instructional.
So I think we should distinguish between, I think some of us are talking more elementary school K through 3. Mm-hmm. I don't recall having a big textbook in kindergarten anyway, and I know certainly my son, and it's not I'm just saying there's a big difference. I agree entirely about middle school and high school, because I think that's where you can really ramp up. But what we hear from as board members, certainly what I hear from constituents, and I know Ms. Caulfield has brought this up, and Chair Haggerty and others, is the concern in elementary school and the constant screen time in elementary school. And my son they do a lot of written work, so that is available. And I'm not saying it should be no screen time, but when do we answer that question to our families and constituents? Ms. Maffey.
Yeah, I think, it's hard because I remember, and granted this was for middle school math, when we selected the open up resources for middle school math, I was able to go to one of the parent forums that we held where you could look at 3 different pieces, and there was no textbook, there was no anything. And so, I know you're familiar with all of the workbooks that your kid gets in math and in EL, with the EL curriculum, because it needs to be printed, but that's our print shop that prints it, because you can't just order a textbook anymore, as Allison stated. And so I think that's the hard piece. But I think we've seen also with DPI switching entirely to testing that is here. Now there's a whole body of research that shows, taking a test with paper and pencil is a little bit different than taking a test on a screen. And so, but I agree. It's, if I will be so excited when I don't have to brought a kid at home to do another Dreambox lesson. It's just my own feeling on that, but I think that's the push-pull that we have, where on one hand, what we know, right, like a book in a hand or a workbook is much more impactful and effective. You can talk about a read-write brain connection. But financially, this is the cheaper option when it comes to, you know, building a library versus having big universe. And that's a hard thing that I think every school district is dealing with. As Chair Haggerty shared, there's no money.
Right.
The other thing I'll add is that particularly at the elementary level, so it is not about having a device that's one-to-one, but it's more so with what Mrs. Mahaffey said, and there are a lot of assessments that take place, whether they're in class or whatever the case may be. We want students to have access to that. And so if I think about, you know, a kindergarten, elementary classroom, chances are they're going to have a cow, a computer on wheels. And so it's not that they physically have that device that they take home, but they have access to it.
But I think the difference is, can we keep this in the classroom and have a class set versus requiring kids to schlep it back and forth between home? Because I also don't think kindergarten, first and second graders should have homework, but that's my own personal appeal.
And many schools subscribe to that, right? Many of our elementary schools by policy don't assign homework at those levels.
And that is where you get into the number of students per device, that 0.98 per one device. And so what that means is that it's not necessarily a device that a kid would take home, but ultimately that district would, you would be one-to-one. You got 18 elementary kids in kindergarten class, and you got 18 computers. Not that they take them home. Yeah, but they're there though.
Yeah, so just to add to that, K2 right now is in carts in classrooms. That's the first thing I want you to know. The second thing I want you to know is that it actually requires more devices. So when we think, and I should also say that right now, those K2 devices are Chromebooks, and that is a pandemic response. It may not be the appropriate device for K2 as we move forward and we look at decisions that need to be made. Just in terms of a kindergartner can't necessarily type quite just yet, and that kinesthetic, you know, drawing and perhaps an iPad is something that we need to look at. But that was a pandemic response. We should also say that we have, when we provide class sets, that means that if we have 3 different third grade classrooms, one has 10 kids, one has, that's a bad example, let me do middle school. Okay. We have to still have, whatever the largest class is, we have to have that many in every class for when kids move around. And so it actually ends up most of the time, being more devices than if it was an individual one-to-one correlation, one device per child. We have to have the maximum number in each classroom. So it ends up sometimes being more devices.
That's why you might have that ratio of 0.98 students per device.
That's right.
Ms. Crawford.
Thank you. So this is a big thing for me, right? Because we have 160,000 students, and we don't have that many classrooms. So I understand, I don't need to not turn around, but
no, you're okay.
I'm really going. And you're right that, you know, what is our goal is more for me, like the concern with that. We don't also have a need in every classroom to have a computer. There's like a lot of different classes that we have that shouldn't even need it, but that means we're giving us a computer to each and every child just in case they're in that situation. So I would love to know the actual numbers with the difference if we have them in the classroom for the individual needs of that particular class versus how much we're supplying. I mean, you mentioned, you know, it's not just buying it, it's running it, it's the staff, it's the update, it's replacing it. Those are a lot of different things. And all of that is kind of like the technical part of, and it's also supply and demand. I don't think that the companies just aren't refusing to make it. We're just not buying it because we're counting on technology.
They don't make textbooks.
I know that, but I'm saying it's like the chicken or the egg. Did they stop making it and they went over to different platforms because they weren't making money because we stopped buying textbooks?
It was a both and textbooks are again, much more expensive and much heavier than carrying this around.
Right, but like, it goes back to what is our goal? I want to, we're talking about our children and how they're learning better. I don't feel that they're learning better and there's plenty of studies and books that are written about all of this. And you mentioned the hand brain. We've talked about that before. There's, activity that happens in your brain when you're using the computer versus a pen and paper and turning a page of a book. I think there's more that we can examine of how we can not steer so much to everything and be dependent on every child having a student, and what does that save for us? And I'd like to know those numbers between examining the classes.
So I think we get, do you know the ratio?
No, I think I just want to generally respond to, there's great questions. Obviously, with limited resources, what we are taking on is a very, very challenging, issue, right? But again, it's a time to recalibrate because during pandemic, basically we issued a device to every student. But given where we are, I think we are stepping back and looking at from a lens of from our academics, what our educators need, what our students need. It doesn't mean that we have the money to really do what they want, but within the budget what we have to come up with those options about what those are. So when we talk about options, we are looking at every option, right? We are looking at BYOD, bring your own device. We're looking at need-based. We're looking at, devices staying at the classroom or the school. So all these options will be discussed. I believe very soon we're going to come forward to the board with all those options. So we're going to solicit feedback from you. We're going to really look at the data. Also talk about the damages and theft and all those things, really provide that information so we can make some informed decision. So that's where we are right now.
And so the other thing I would add is that we can give you the number of the student-to-device ratio. But obviously that's going to talk about all devices, not just the idea that you're one-to-one. And so whenever you have those numbers, it's really going to talk about the access that they have to devices. The other thing is that when we think about being one-to-one, there is a reason that Wake County was not one-to-one before the pandemic. 160-some thousand students. That comes at a tremendous cost. And so most districts that were one-to-one were probably less than 10,000 students because they could fund it and afford it to probably do it for high school students only. And so that is something that we have to really think about, that being one-to-one is just really something we can't afford. But we can have a ratio where every student has access to a device. But I think it's what we're all saying. We've got to get out of the pandemic mode. But we also have to realize that it is about what curriculum material is available to kids. And I can tell you that there is, I don't know much that we can do to get any textbook company to go back and do what they used to do, because what they now know is that they can do all of the information, create all the information to go into a book and never have to print it and reduce their costs, I don't know, by 70, 80%. I don't think. And they can update it constantly. Yeah. So it's part of the discussion that I know districts are having all across the country. But the cost of technology is high. One-to-one is something that a district of our size cannot afford. It is about how we have appropriate access.
Thank you, Mr. Hershey. I think I just wanted to chime in on a couple of pieces. I think for me, we know that technology is here to stay. And if our goal is to prepare students for the next phase of their life, we have to find ways that are cost prohibitive to meet the mark. I think it would be asinine just to say that we don't need to use technology and just go back to pen and paper for books, when even at the collegiate level, it's much cheaper to get a book electronically than it is to have those. I mean, when I taught, I think the social studies book still had George W. Bush as the president. So, I mean, how do we... So yes, I think it's a both and, but I also think we have to trust the educators to know that they understand what tools their students need and meet those students where they are and where they want them to be. And so I think if that is including all the pieces that we have, that let's trust those educators and our staff to make those decisions. But I, as a board member, will not and cannot support just abolishing technology when the goal is to get students caught up. But I do think there should be some perimeters for those K-2 students. But again, we don't have the luxury of parenting other people's kids. I think that's what the Printed Bill of Rights was trying to do.
So if I could add to that, ultimately, it is not about a device, but it is about digital teaching and learning standards and how we integrate the technology into a student's life that they're going to see every day. And so at the end of the day, we're going to have technology to do that, but it really does come down to how much of that do we have to have in order to address those digital teaching and learning standards and integrate all of that curriculum from a digital standpoint and a regular standpoint. And so I can tell you that going into a classroom and seeing a teacher teaching with a PowerPoint that the kids, well, you may as well give them a piece of paper. That's not digital teaching and learning. That's just, but I think that is the key piece, is how do we focus on the curriculum standards from a digital perspective and not let devices overweigh what it is that we want to do. It's a balance that we have to make.
So thank you. And, it's a strong point, and I want to recognize it. And, I want to be clear, no one is saying, well, the look that we're presenting here, other questions that might have risen at the board table aside, I'm not advocating for any abolition of technology, and I know that's not what you were implying. I just want to make that clear. But we know we have limited funds. And as we look at a CIP for program requirements of $155 million and see it grow to $203 million from 2026 to 2032, and we know that we are not taking care of the basic infrastructure of our school buildings, we have to make tough decisions. All of these services, all of these programs we fund have value. No one is disagreeing with that. But to take technology devices from here at about $20 million and grow that to about $30 million, when we have so many other needs that we've talked about at this table and those that we haven't. We've sort of beat up on books, but let's talk about libraries, and let's talk about our library collections, and let's talk about libraries that we have right now that you go to books and they talk about, well, one day when we land on the moon, it would be great to see where technology goes and where where we might advance. Most everyone at this board table, not everyone, but have heard from our librarians about the need to invest in these facilities. We've had board members that have talked about physical education and our facilities and our playgrounds, and especially at some locations, just how, unserviceable they are. The kids can see the playground, they're not allowed on it. Issues with our HVAC systems, issues with humidity that contribute to health problems, right? Potential health problems for students and staff. We have to find a way to fund all of these competing needs. And again, while we know that technology needs to be a part of it, I think we have to ask hard questions about our reliance on that technology, how we use it, how we replace it. We know technology will need to be upgraded. We know there will be costs, but to the point that was made, the difference between, keeping devices at home versus sending them, or sending devices home versus keeping them at school. We've seen, WCPSS has sent out email to all the parents about it, about students willfully destroying devices through social media challenges. That comes out of our budget. Every lost, every destroyed Chromebook. And it's going to happen regardless with children, but when it's intentional, we have to figure out how to address these things. And so, I think if you look back at our spending in these capital areas over the last 10 years, the last 15 years, maybe the last 20 years, you will see areas that we have not adequately funded, where I believe we've done the minimum to get by, and we're paying the price for that. And we need to take strong action to move the needle and address these important facilities issues. And unless something changes right now at the state government, we're going to have to do this by reprioritizing the money that we're getting from the county for these purposes to address some of those important health, safety and security, and, other needs that by not keeping up with our maintenance, by deferring it, we're increasing costs down the road. By having a safety and security plan that we can't fully implement on a timely basis, we put kids at risk. By having our teachers and our students in buildings with, humidity levels that are unsafe, well, I won't say unsafe, but that are highly suspect in some cases, that we need to be able to address those, and we need to be able to address them today. So I can't, I'm not saying that any of these expenses don't have benefits and don't have value, but I'm just saying we have other priorities and we have to get these costs under control.
Well, that was a great segue to what I was going to say, because I'm so glad that the chair of our county commission, Ms. Stevenson Evans, is here, because she can help fill in any history gaps that I might miss. Because, the next piece that our facilities chair has up is talking about our CIP. And, it used to be that these things were tied to specific projects, and in 1999, a bond failed, and that did include a huge technology piece. And so since then, we've seen the county and the school district come together to help create the CIP as we know it now. And so I think this is a really great partnership that we have, not only with our county commission, so that we're not constantly fighting about facilities issues, but also as a commitment to our community, and also working with our facilities team and our county's facilities and financial teams to make sure that we're doing this. So I'm excited to see this here, and I had more to say about the other topic, but I'm trying, Mr. Hershey, to help move us on. So
I'm going to go back to the other topic.
Oh,
I do want to say
great.
one thing about technology.
I tried.
I was really happy to hear some comments on it. Does a first grader get the same computer as a high school kid?
So you want to talk about the distribution?
In most cases, yes.
So that's where I am curious as to, I don't want to say they don't need. I would be surprised if they needed the same capacity on a device that someone in high school does. You brought that up, and I brought up examining what we are putting in the hands of K through 3. Are we overkill? And I get it, it was an immediate response, order a bunch of devices. But are we going, I sort of touched on that, are we now evaluating what specific devices and what they actually need? And is that something that could reduce at least the device cost? It may not be all of elementary school, but for 4 or 5 grades.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's based on the need for what's needed for the elementary and everything. That is definitely the core of the question, yes.
So that's on the table, and we're kind of looking at
That is
that.
correct.
How long of a process is that?
So right now, as I said, we finished the survey. We're going to, obviously the focus was on the cell phone policy and everything. Now we're going to shift our focus into the whole device strategies. The goal is, this fall, we would like to finalize the strategy, but what we're going to do, that's going to give us enough time if we have to change something the next school year, we can absolutely do that. That is school year 26, 27.
So, a couple questions on it. I've heard that some staff might have 2 devices currently as we're kind of rotating. How often are we rotating, or is staff getting new devices or students because You got it.
So
yeah.
most students, most teachers do not have two devices. There's a passing of the ships in the night. So we deployed the new devices. There was a delay in us collecting the old devices. So we are collecting the old devices right now. And so I'd say we've collected about 80%, I think, of our staff devices. So slowly that is getting down to where they will only have one device. It's not by design. It wasn't intended to be that way. There was just a delay in the collection of that. As far as when we deploy new devices, we replace the student Chromebooks for students in grades 3, 6, and 9. When we collect those, so right now we're collecting those devices from the students so that we can refurbish them and redeploy them for next year. Those become our loaners, those become the replacements for the students that break their new Chromebooks, but every student will get a new device in those grades. The staff devices we've been replenishing every 4 to 5 years. That kind of coincides with warranties, with the cycle of technology. I think the devices that we just got, it was about 5 years, because I got mine right around COVID or right before COVID, and then I just got my new device in like October of this year. So it's been about 5 years for the staff devices.
What do we do with devices when they are not?
So right now, we're in conversations with Lenovo to buy back the devices that are non-functional. They become a broker for us to find the best deal as far as getting rid of the devices that we can't do anything with. They will also purchase any of the devices we do not plan to redeploy. Like, we don't necessarily need 20,000 extra devices sitting around, so they're willing to buy those back from us. We're in conversations with them. That money would then go back as a credit to us so that we could use that to buy other equipment needs that can also help offset. And that's not something we've done in the past. That is a new thing. But we've already had them on site. They brought their whole team. That's looking really, really promising.
That's great news. Gordon.
Thank you. I know a lot of our conversation is around academics, and I guess my overall question is, what is the conversation that's happening between academics and technology?
I don't think there's any official conversations happening about the devices right now. But I can say I personally call academics almost every day and have conversations like, well, what do you want us to do about that? That's your lane, that's not my lane. Because I do get a lot of questions pointed at me that are academics questions, and I'm not going to go into that lane. But I have a really good relationship with my friends in academics, and we just allow them to do that. I will say one more thing I wanted to point out is that we're even looking to work with CTE, possibly get their students trained to do Chromebook repair. One of our vendors that we work with is willing to train them and get them certified. There's lots of opportunities. It's just going to take some time to do it. So we are looking for ways to save money, maximize what we're doing, also benefit the students in that way.
The other thing I would add is that when we talk about devices, and normally you're going to be on some kind of refresh cycle. So you talk about 3, 6, and 9. And so that means also that at some point we've got to think about how do we break that particular cycle and pivot to something new. And so wherever we are now, that plan has probably been in place for a while. I know in my former district, that's what we had, a refresh cycle that we can count on and not have to buy a huge number of devices, K-12 at one time. So that's also one of the things we're going to have to think about is how do we pivot and break a cycle and turn to something new.
So now I'll kind of pivot off of technology. So I sent staff some questions, I shared them with the board. As the chair has brought up the potential to reallocate funds, I think the question for me is if we were able to do that, if we made some smaller changes, if we looked at the land acquisition amount, how much we're using, how much we have historically used, are we going to need it if we repurpose, let's say, $5 million? So the question would be, if we sent that some money for HVAC, could it be put to use? If we sent it to trailer repair, could it be put to use? If we sent it to safety and security, could it be put to use, or would it just be we don't have the capability? So I know there's some people here, and I'd love to hear from.
So this is, I'll share my thoughts on this, and then other people can give their opinion as well. But I understand what the board is saying, and I agree 100%. And it goes back to Chair Harrigan's point, that it's not about whether we do or don't fund something, but part of what we've got to do is examine all of the resources that we have and then identify those critical areas and think about how can we now put resources towards addressing those things that have become, that have grown as a problem for years, and now we're forced to do something about it. So that doesn't mean that we stop buying technology, but that means we may have to use technology funds to fund some of these other projects. It may mean that we have to stop doing some other things in different areas. If we think about libraries, if now the commitment is $0 and it's up to principals to make that choice, then that may be an area where we have to say, now we have to make a specific commitment. And so it is about examining all the resources that we have on the table. And what I can tell you is that we have a number of areas that can contribute, not stop what they're doing. I can tell you that Chief Boodle said to me when I shared with him the things that we were looking at with technology, and he said, yes, that is certainly within an acceptable range of being able to reduce what we spend on technology but still do the critical work. And so that is where, Mr. Hershey, I think we are, that if we know what those critical things are, then we have to find additional resources to put towards that. And that means that we've got to look at all areas and determine what percentage can they bring forward and be able to contribute. And we know a lot of that is within that local budget, even though we have state and federal funding, but it is holistically re-examining every single dime that we have and then identifying those key areas and moving on, because the public is not going to wait.
And I know, and this is just this jumping off point conversation, that from Chair Harrigan's initial proposal at the board meeting, but like I do look at and I know, and I'm thrilled with the facilities team and the 20-year plan. I think we'll get some answers as part of that plan. But when I do see, $84 million for land purchase and property acquisition, and I know that, we're creating some new processes there, and we have a lot of land already, and I think if I had
pivot area for sure.
Though if I had $8 million of that spread over those years going to libraries, we could do a lot, and libraries could start to get caught up, not to the degree we might all wish, but it would be a big start. And so I think we can kind of figure out a conversation or way to begin to bring some proposals, whether it's to a work session or bring it back to facilities since it is the CIP, over the next several months of some potential changes. Does that sound?
Absolutely, yeah. It's one thing, staff works on these issues all year, but then the board, typically we only see it a few times at the end of the process, where you really can't feel like you can change anything because of all the work done to date. But hopefully, through this process, we can at least share our priorities with you that you can take back to staff and sort of see if we want to accelerate the timeline for the security improvements that came out of our security audit. How much would that cost, and how could we do that effectively? To Mr. Hershey's point, how much of it is done by contractors versus needing internal staff? Are there funds that could be made available for library collections? If the issue with mobile trailers, how many times have we sat around talking about student assignment issues and transportation issues and school capacity issues, and questions have come back to trailers that we've been trying to phase out for 10 or 15 years, right? The same trailers that when we visit schools, we see. And Mr. Strickland was with me at Panther Creek High School, right? We'll see a broken bathroom, holes in floors. You hear stories about all of these other important needs. We can't just keep doing the same thing and expect these problems are somehow going to resolve themselves. And I don't have any illusions that I have the best plan or the best strategy. What I believe in my heart, and after a few years of doing this, is that we're never going to make progress on these other important issues that the public is coming to us about week after week after week unless we change something. And so this is where I'm trying to start that conversation. So I appreciate you bringing this up and your commitment to continuing to work on this.
Anyone else? Ms. Edmonds, got anything for you? All right. I think that's it for our agenda. So we'll get out a few minutes early. And I appreciate the beginning of the conversation and everyone being here. And I expect you'll be hearing more questions. It's going to be a great process, so I'm thankful. That concludes our facilities meeting. Thank you all.